Hi everyone, welcome back to Plant Boy. My name is Cade, and today we are going to be taking a look at propagation. If you haven't already followed me on Instagram or any other social media platforms, they will be listed down below. I encourage every one of you to like the video if you enjoyed it and comment down below. The engagement really does help us reach new audience members and grow the channel and the community. So all of the plants in front of me here today actually have one thing in common, and that is all of these were rooted in a form of propagation. There are different methods of propagation, and I do have several videos that show examples of specific propagations. Specifically, I have pothos and snake plant propagation videos that I will have linked below, as well as the eye popping up here, in an actual playlist for propagation as well. So if you're interested in watching specific examples of propagation, you can definitely do so in those videos. However, today I will just kind of give a recap over propagation, what it is, how to do it, and various methods on how to propagate different types of plants. So the majority of propagations that you may see here on YouTube, and by far the most common way of propagating, is known as taking cuttings and propagating them. So we can see that in this example over here. This is a jade pothos, or a reverted marble queen pothos, that I took cuttings of. I believe this was in a video, but all propagations for these vining plants are going to be very similar. So this is actually a vine that got chopped up, and then it is actually forming this new root growth here in this water. You can also just put your propagations or these vines into soil as well and let them grow that way. That works just fine as well. So lots of vining plants are propagated through cuttings. Things like the Rhaphidophora tetrasperma or the mini monstera would be a good example of that as well, because it is a vining plant, as we can see. Things like the Hoya carnosa compacta or the Hindu rope is another good example of a vining plant that can be snipped and put into water or soil to propagate as well. Furthermore, the regular monstera is actually a vining plant that can be snipped and put into water or soil. Another kind of category of plant that can be propagated via cuttings are going to be self-heading plants. Okay, so I just grabbed a self-heading plant to show you what I mean. These are going to be kind of like trees, is what you can think of them as, plants that grow vertically and not a vining shape. So these are known as self-heading plants, and these can also be propagated via cuttings. So you can cut right below one of the leaves where a node is and remove some of the bottom leaves, place it into soil or water, and it will actually form roots from where you cut it or at the node, and you can then transplant it or just keep it in the soil that you just put it in. There are various other plants that are not typically propagated through cutting. These are going to be rhizomal plants, plants that have a rhizome or kind of like a root system that grows underground and pops out somewhere in the soil. Things like potato, ginger, sweet potato, and other things like that actually grow through tubers or a form of rhizome. One example of that I have here is going to be the ZZ plant. This is a very common plant that grows rhizomally. If you were to strip away the soil of this plant, you would actually see kind of like potato-like bulbs at the base of each of these stems, and those are the rhizomes where the growth is pushed out of. They are really great for water storage and things like that, but these plants oftentimes, I don't believe, but these plants are not propagated through cutting. In fact, I don't think it is possible to root these through cutting, but rather through division. Things like ferns and various lilies and things like that. Cast iron plant is another example of plants that you can't just cut and put into water or soil and expect to root, but rather you would have to pull apart all of these separate plants that are actually within the same pot. So I could just pull this, which is probably leading to one tuber or one rhizome down in here, and actually just cut it off and transplant it into a different pot and let it grow up that way. And over time, it will push out new growth in that new pot and fill out. So again, plants like the ZZ plant, plants like the peace lily as far as I'm aware, and ferns cannot be propagated through cutting. These are going to have to be through seed spore for ferns, for example, or through division, which is most common. And the last type of propagation that you may come along is known as air layering. And this is actually a very interesting way of stripping away a certain portion of the bark on self-heading plants more often than not, and placing usually wet moss in saran wrap around the area that you just exposed. And this sort of tricks the plant into thinking that that area of the bark that is now exposed is in some kind of soil or growing media, and it starts to push out roots from the area that you cut. So eventually you are going to be cutting this plant where you air layered it. However, it does kind of give the plant a head start to form roots outside of any kind of soil media and just in moss kind of floating on the side of the plant. And that way you can kind of watch the roots develop and then transplant it whenever you find it to be necessary. You can find a lot of air laying videos specifically on rubber trees. I've seen a lot. So if we were to kind of trim away some of the bark here and then wrap this in saran wrap with some moss in there as well and keep it relatively moist in a sunny location, then the plant would think that that is exposed to a growing media and would actually push out roots from that area. Then you could snip it right below there whenever you so desire and then transplant it into your, pot of choice. And there are kind of a few different ones as well. These plants, specifically the Paelia Peppermoides here, or the watermelon peperomia, these are really good examples of plants that you can either kind of do both with. These are self-heading plants, specifically the Paelia Peppermoides here I'm familiar with more so than the watermelon. And this actually grows upright, and this I actually was infested with aphids and I snipped it right off of the top and I treated it separately to kind of, combat any kind of infestation, and then I propagated it this way. And we can see that it is finally starting to establish and starting to push out new growth here, and I will actually just pluck off these older leaves as it establishes here. However, with Paelia, I have heard that you can take a cutting of just one leaf if and only if you get a piece of the bark or a piece of the main growing stem on the cutting, which is actually a node, which is where it will form out the new roots and push out the new growth. However, I actually traded some plants with somebody online, and they sent me just some chopped up leaves of their watermelon peperomia, and I was under the impression that it was not going to do anything because I didn't see any node or any kind of bark on there. However, I let it root in water over a period of several weeks, and then I transplanted it into soil, and much to my surprise, I saw roots growing in water, and once I transplanted it, it has since turned into this. And it seems relatively happy. I just have to kind of figure out what this plant likes and get accustomed to it, and keep an eye on it and make sure that it is happy. So the Paelia, certain ones, and certain plants in general can be done in several different ways. Another example of this would be the string of turtles, which I actually have a cutting of over here. This is actually just one vining cutting that I had that I am letting root just because it fell off. However, I have seen people just actually propagate individual little turtles. Oh, there it goes. It said bye. But I've actually seen people just sit those on top of soil and let them root individually as well. So, there's no right or wrong way to propagate. It's definitely experimental as we kind of learn different things as a community. And, if I said anything that may be misleading in this video, or I said that you can't do something that you can do, let me know, because I am learning just like every single one of you. But yeah, propagating is dangerous, if I may say so myself, because once you start, you're going to get more and more and more houseplants. So happy propagating, everyone, and let the community here know if you have any kind of tips or tricks on propagating, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye.